Hello and welcome, Cindy Daychuck from Queen Bee Creations. I'm popping on today because I anticipate that I'm going to be doing a pretty cool little finish that I want to share with you, give you some of the lowdown and the how-tos. Now, this particular piece, which my clients were using as a buffet, it's pretty low, however, so I see it more as maybe a TV stand, maybe a great hallway table. It would be good at the foot of a bed instead of like a, chest or something like that. So a little bit of a different piece. Now, here's the thing. They were dropping it off for me to refinish for them, and they had a piece of mine that I had done maybe about 2 years ago for them that they loved, which was painted in an Annie Sloan color duck egg blue and with some glazing on it. And they wanted this one painted to match. When they dropped it off, they looked in my showroom and fell in love with this big, beautiful antique cabinet that I had, which happened to also go with their piece. And so they left with it, and they left this one behind. So this is mine to refinish. And as much as I had kind of had it in my head that I was going to be doing it in that lovely pale blue of Annie Sloan's, I've changed my mind. Now, here's one thing that's kind of cool about this piece, is that these cabinet panels are reversible. They have these little swivel hook things that you see on the back of picture frames. And you can flip this out. Now, I haven't seen this before, and maybe I haven't been around as much as I thought. You'd think at my age I have. But here's the thing, look at these. They are kind of this distressed coppery piece. They've got these extra little rivet pieces on for interest. I love this. So I'm gonna flip these around at the end, and I'm going to use that side as the panel. And I'm gonna use this as the inspiration. So we are going to start off by painting 2 coats of black paint on this. So we're going dark. And then we're gonna lighten up, but we're gonna go dark. I'm gonna be using Little Black Dress from DIY, and as always, you can get the paint and the materials that I use on any of these videos on my website, queenbeecreationshome.com. But once we got the black on, we're gonna start adding back a little bit of color. We're gonna be adding in some copper, obviously, and we're gonna be doing a little bit of rusting. So stick with me, it's gonna be fun. Now, you will notice I've left the hardware on this piece, and that's because I'm going to be painting right over it. I want to add the rust and the copper and things to this. I perhaps want to have it dripping down, so I am going to leave it in place so that it becomes a cohesive part of the piece. Okay, we now have 2 coats of our black DIY Little Black Dress on the piece, and we've got the inserts out, which is what you can see the inside of this. It's now time for us to start adding our specialty paint, and I'm reaching here in behind me for this. So what this is it's from Modern Masters, and what we're going to be doing is adding this iron oxidizing paint. So this is paint that has little tiny pieces of iron filings added in, that when we spritz on or we apply, the activator will cause real rust. Now we're going to need to leave this overnight so that we can see how much rust, see if we want to add more activator. But before I do any of the other colors to this, I want to see how much rust look I get going, and then see whether or not I like it as it is, if I want to add something else. So it's always kind of good where I know that this is going to be my main look, to be able to add it. Now, if I was doing this on metal, and especially when I get to the handles and things, I will need to add this primer first. And what it does is it prevents the rust from actually eating away at the metal. On the wood, I don't need to worry about it. I can just do the black paint directly on it. The iron paint directly on it, because it's going to do its own thing, but it's not going to actively eat at or work away at any of the wood. So we only have to worry about it when we're doing metal, and then we'll just lay down the primer and we'll do a couple of coats of the iron paint. Once it's dry, I'll come back, because we need this to dry fully before we apply the activator, and I'll show you how I'm going to do it. It comes with a spray nozzle, but I don't want it to kind of spritz everywhere. It'll sort of discolor and stain this. So we're going to be applying it in an alternative way so that it's not an issue. So one of the things that you want to do with this paint is you really want to shake it up really well, or stir it up if you've got a particularly full jar. Bang it to open it. Okay, there we go. Muscles. Just, you want to ensure that you've got any of the iron filings that have settled down to the bottom, that we've got them coming up into the paint. And then you're simply going to take the paint. Oh, I can feel some of them sitting on the bottom. I'm just going to stir it up a little bit. And obviously not keeping my brush particularly clean or neat, since I'm way down on the bottom. And we're just going to be applying it where we want some of that rust to be. So I know that I want down on these edgings. And here's part of the challenge on this, is that I've got black paint and I'm applying black paint over it. And I know that I want to have 2 coats of this. And I don't know how much. Once it dries, I'm really going to be able to see where I applied it. So I'm kind of going in a little bit slow here and seeing as I go if I'm going to be able to tell where it was and where it was and where it wasn't. So that even once it's dry, that I know where I want to apply the activator. And I want this a little bit feathery looking. I don't want it to be totally solid. So I'm also sort of trying to feather it in a little bit, so that I've got some sections that are a little bit heavier than others, but some sections where it looks more like it's just kind of worn itself in. And it's really just as simple as that. Just making some decisions about where you want it, how much you want it to show. We're going to want to do a second coat over top of it. And that's it. We'll take it from there. Okay, we've got our 2 coats of our iron oxide paint on, and you can tell where it is versus the black paint. So it's going to make my life so much easier. You can just spray this on, but I do find that it discolors the rest of the paint around it. So to save myself a little bit of headache later, repainting some of the sections, I'm going to pour a little bit out onto a paper plate. Now, the way that you apply this and the amount that you get onto your piece in different ways does have an impact on what it ultimately ends up looking like. Doing is dipping my brush in and kind of painting on the activator where I have the paint. So trying to get a little bit of coverage here, and again, the amount that I put on there is going to have an impact on what the overall look is and how much it changes. You have the opportunity once it's dry, so we're going to need to leave this overnight to be able to see some of the rust come out, see how much has been activated. If I think that I would like more, I can add more activator, leave it again overnight, see how much comes out. If I still don't have as much rust as I would want, I could repaint it, add a little bit more. Maybe I didn't have enough iron filings in that section. That's a possibility. So all we're doing is we're applying the activating liquid over top of our paint, and then we're just gonna let it sit and do its magic. It does all of the hard work for us. Well, as you can see, we got some good rust color that came out. It does tend to be even brighter than this. I did a quick little spray with a polyacrylic finish. Just I like to get a little bit of the spray on before I start brushing with a top coat, just to help keep the rust sealed. Otherwise, I find that you tend to brush a lot of it off. So the next step in the process is we do have to formally seal it. And for this, I usually use a polyacrylic. I mean, I'm just using a Varathane. It's in a matte finish, which I like. And it's clear, done and clear. We're gonna seal it and coat it. That's gonna stop it from rusting further, and it's going to keep the rust on the piece and not brushing off on the people. as you're using it. So there's no magic to this. We're just going to be brushing it on. You can use a foam brush for this. Any flat brush that you have would work. It tends to kind of foam up and bubble up, so I do go back over it a little bit just to wipe those kind of bubbles away a little bit so I get a nice smooth finish. It's fairly forgiving as long as it hasn't really had time to start to set up. You're not going to make it any rougher. I don't sand this piece like I do some of the others to create a really smooth surface. The rust creates a texture. That's part of the beauty of this piece. That's part of the look of it, is also the feel of it. You're going to feel that rust finish on there. It's going to have some texture to it. I like that. If you don't like it, then you probably aren't going to like this finish. In which case, just don't do this one. Do a different one. All right. For this next step, I'm hoping that you can see it because it's going to be very subtle. For this, I am using a gilding wax. This one happens to be from Annie Sloan, and it is in copper. I decided that this looks a little bit dulled down from what I would like. I'd like the metal to be a little bit more pronounced. So I'm taking a small little artist brush, I'm dabbing just a little bit of the gilding wax. It goes far. And I am just adding in, just very lightly at a time. This goes a long way. A little bit more of that kind of metallic shimmer in spots. So just to kind of accent the rust is all sealed now. So we're just doing this gilding wax on top, and it will seal itself, so I don't need to reseal the piece after. When I first have the wax on, when it's a little bit heavy, I'm gonna kind of use it very judiciously in some spots where maybe the rust is a little bit heavier. Once it's kind of, my brush is almost empty, then I'll kind of rub it down a little bit more in some of the areas to get a little bit of a stronger color in there, but without it being way too bold. What I am getting with this, and I think that you're seeing it, is just a little bit more of a shimmery kind of feel to some of the rust. It's dressing it up just a little bit without taking away from that rust look, but it's adding in a little bit of the orangey color that we lost when we sealed the piece. And so I'm gonna do this over the whole piece and then take a look and see if I need more of something else or if I think I'm done. So very often with these things, it's just going a step at a time to be able to kind of see where it takes you, not second guessing the piece ahead. Sometimes, you know, you plan out some of these things. I'd originally thought maybe I'd be adding in some blue and yellow, but I'm thinking now I just want to stay with the metallics and the black. All right, this is going to be the last step in the process. I've decided that I wanted a little bit more color in addition to everything else that's going on in this piece. So add a little bit of shimmer over some of the stark blacks. So what I am going to be adding is some pennies from heaven, which is a bit of a color patina from DIY. Absolutely beautiful. But we're going to be using it fairly lightly, and by that it means I'm kind of wetting the piece, I'm dabbing some of it on, and then we're going to take the mister bottle and we're going to wet it enough to get it moving. So it's going to kind of drip down, add a bit of a shimmer, and just a little bit more interest. And I'm going to let it cool down here and dry down there to create, again, a little bit more color down in the base. This is a fairly top-heavy piece, so I kind of like giving the legs a little bit more. And I'm just, wherever it's a little bit heavier, just adding a little bit more of this. And then I am, because I want it to stop a little bit and not have big runners, just a little bit more of that copper look along there. The rest of the piece is sealed, so we don't have to worry about that. And I am going to do a little bit more of it on the legs. As I said, I want the legs to be a little bit heavier looking because it's a fairly low to the ground piece. The top is fairly heavy, so I'm just going to give a little bit more color to some of the areas on the legs and let it kind of cool down in around the base and add a bit of a shimmer. This copper actually has kind of a sparkly iridescence to it. You can use it so that it's nice and thick, but you can actually paint with it, get a bit of a coating going, or again, just get some of that shimmering action happening and let it kind of coat down over top of things. So again, going a little bit heavier on some of the metallics on this piece, all springboarding off of those original copper plates on that doorway, okay, on those door fronts. So I'm just going to carry on doing this over the piece. Over the front, which is a little bit different on the top. Let it dry. We'll put the panels back in the front, and then it's done. I'll get it all staged up and you'll see how it looks as it's finished.